You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Today the guns are silent. A great tragedy has ended. A great victory has been won.
That was U.S. General Douglas MacArthur proclaiming the official end of World War II on September 2nd, 1945, with Japan's formal surrender. And so ended the Japanese occupation of Southeast Asia and the Pacific, which started in 1941, and the retreat from the occupied lands began. This included Japan's withdrawal from Taiwan. But there's a difference here. Taiwan was not occupied during the war, but colonized since 1895, half a century before the end of World War II. And in these 50 years, there was a unique development, the creation of the wansei. The wansei, or wansheng as referred to in Taiwan, are Japanese citizens who were born in Taiwan between 1895 and 1945 under colonial Japanese rule. After the war, the wansei were repatriated from Taiwan back to Japan. In this week's CNA Correspondent podcast, we delve into the fast disappearing group of the wansei. I'm Genevieve Woo, and joining me today are Michiyo Ishida, our senior Japan correspondent, and Victoria Jen, our senior Taiwan correspondent.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Vic.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Mitch.
Great to have you with us. Michiyo, let's start with you. Our quest to deep dive into the wansei, who they are, where they are now, their contributions, their memories. It's your idea. What inspired you, Michiyo?
Wansei are Japanese who were born in Taiwan during the period of Japan's colonization. They were sons, daughters of government officials, professors, members of various industries working on developing Taiwan at the time. They went to local Japanese schools. They were taught by Japanese teachers. And I hear that the education level back then was pretty high. And wansei called Taiwan their home. Many of them have never set foot in Japan until after World War II. Now, the reason why I decided to feature wansei was my mother was a wansei. Now, after she died in 2019, I visited Taiwan for the first time to search her roots. She loved mango, papaya, from consuming them in Taiwan. Now, those fruits were not common in Japan back then. She often told me she lived in a nice house with a stream running through her garden, and she had fruit trees. Her father worked for the Commerce Department of the Governor General's office, which was the top political command office during the colonial period. And it was in control of developing Taiwan's infrastructure, railway system, medicine, the sugarcane industry. I also remember her telling me she had to leave behind most of her belongings at the time of repatriation. So basically, my mother's death was the main reason why I decided to start my research on wansei.
When you proposed the idea, many of us, me included, were not familiar with this concept. But once we start digging into it, this is fascinating. But there wasn't very much material, actually, that we found online. Now, when you tell people you're the daughter of a wansei, Michiyo, what are their reactions?
Well, Japanese in general are not familiar with the term wansei. So I didn't know what wansei was either, because my mother basically never used the word wansei to describe herself. So not until I looked into Japanese born in Taiwan during the colonization period as a story did the word wansei become familiar to me. In any case, it hardly occurred to me to tell people that my mother was born in Taiwan. Only if I met some Taiwanese or somebody who had Taiwan connection that I would tell them.
So my impression is correct. It is fairly unknown. Now, Victoria, when you were helping on this story, how did you feel when Michiyo first told you about her idea of a wansei, that she's a daughter of a wansei? What was your first reaction?
Yeah, when she first told me, I was like, wow, that was fascinating. Because as a journalist, I have reported on Taiwan-Japan ties for many years, but never thought about them in such a personal and intimate way. And honestly, in Taiwan, most people don't really know much about wansei. The older generation will talk about both the good and the bad of Japanese rule, but for younger people, they mostly just think about Japan as this super friendly neighbor, fun trips, pop culture, and food. So when you bring up wansei, people are curious because it's not something that they usually hear about.
Why do you think that is? Is it not included in the education, in the textbooks, both in Japan or in Taiwan?
I think it's because we hear so much about Japan pulling out of China or Southeast Asia, but Taiwan barely gets mentioned. And I think it's because Taiwan wasn't just occupied. It had been under Japan for 50 years. So it's really considered as part of Japan's territory at the time. And then it came the Kuomintang that took over Taiwan. So from their perspective, China's history was much more important than Taiwan itself. So it just fell through the cracks. And what's left are people's stories passed down in families instead of anything official in the history books.
So it's pretty much oral history then, not
That's
so much
right.
written history. Is that the same over there in Japan, Michiyo?
Speaking about Japanese retreating from other parts of Asia after World War II, there were more Japanese actually retreating from Taiwan than from Southeast Asia. For instance, from Taiwan, there were about 480,000 in 1946. This is according to the Japanese Health Ministry. They included civilians and soldiers, and actually, the older Japanese are aware Japan colonized Taiwan and the Japanese had to later leave Taiwan. But I would say it may not be as well known among the young people here on Japanese retreating from places they occupied. Children, basically, when they study about World War II, they study about Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the places that had to face the world's first nuclear bombings.
Most of the wansei today will be in their 80s and their 90s. Actually, the youngest wansei would be 80 today. How many did you manage to track down, and how many agreed to talk to you, Michiyo? And did any of them actually reject you?
Okay, I started by contacting Taiwan authority in Japan and a professor in Taiwan who's been helping to preserve Japanese heritage homes in Taiwan. And both did eventually link me up to wansei. My newly made contacts actually pushed me to work hard, work fast, because onseis were aging and no time can be wasted. As you said, 80s, 90s, and even older. So that's what I did. And my contacts gave me names of those who were well, okay, that's important, and had strong memories of the past. And they were basically all very happy to talk about their life. I perhaps had too many people I wanted to talk to. And especially they were more than happy to talk to me because they learned that I was a daughter of a wansei.
And you worked with Victoria in Taiwan when you did this. So, Vic, when Michiyo told you that she's the daughter of a wansei and she's coming to Taiwan to look for her mother's roots, what was your first reaction?
My first thought was this is going to be very emotional because Taiwan is full of traces from that time. We're talking about old houses, schools, and streets. But most of us just walk by every day without really noticing them. So when Mitch said that she wants to trace her mom's childhood here, I thought, wow, that's going to be a very powerful way to connect memory with physical places that are still around. And it's almost like giving the past a second life.
No, absolutely. Michiyo, when you tracked down the house that your mom lived on, take us through that journey. How did you track it down and how did you feel when you first laid eyes on it?
Okay, I'm sorry to disappoint, but honestly, I felt detached. I never knew the place. They were not in my childhood memory. I've never seen them. Okay, I've seen a bit on photos. I think I would have been more thrilled if I were able to take my mother actually to those places and watch her reaction. But unfortunately, that never happened.
This is the first time you guys are working together on this episode, am I right?
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about that. We'll start with Victoria first. How was it like working together with Michiyo on this very special topic?
Normally, Michiyo and I work separately, and then we stitch our reports together. But this time, it really felt like a conversation between us, almost like Japan and Taiwan are talking to each other, because it was so personal for her, and there's so much story to tell. And I just try to bring the Taiwan perspective to round it out. And pretty quickly, we realized that 30 minutes just wasn't going to cut it. The story needed space. So it just eventually became an hour for the first time.
Yeah, that's very special. Most of our shows are 30 minutes. In this case, it's a very special. It's 1 hour. Michiyo, what was your experience collaborating with Vic?
Oh, it was great. I was communicating with her often in the early days because we had to see what will work, what may not work. And I had to do my sudden hotel booking and she helped me out with that too. So I'm very thankful and she helped me out with her camera crew. He was really great too. So this collaboration really couldn't have happened. She and her team was so crucial for me.
Fantastic. And in your very epic journey in Taiwan to track down the wansei, who was the most memorable character you met in this piece? Probably very difficult to choose since you met so many. And what struck you most about his or her story?
Yeah, I'd say all the people I met, they were so important in my stories. The starter was meeting Professor Huang Hui of Institute of Ethnology, Academia Sinica. She's been trying to preserve old Japanese homes in Taipei for decades. She connected me to Yuri Ito, who was not born in Taiwan, but her siblings were. And she told me that Miss Yuri was coming to Taiwan to look for her family roots. And I called Yuri for a chit-chat. I liked her plans that she was going to visit her old house in Taipei. And she was also planning to visit the port city of Keelung, where Japanese back in the old times embarked and disembarked. And her family history went all the way back to 19th century. So I didn't want to miss her rich story. So I decided to follow her. And that's the way my whole story began. And I also met Hisashi Nimoto, whose father was also a wansei. He was one of those who worked hard to develop sugar cane plantation. And his grandfather was very important to develop Taiwan's railway system. So he was another key profile in my story. And I cannot but omit talking about Masao Go. He was Taiwanese, born in Taiwan, but he fought the war under the Japanese military. His life was so dramatic. The war ended in North Korea for him. He was taken by the Soviets, put into intern camp, but eventually was back in Japan pursuing his studies. So all these people I met, whoa, they were wonderful.
And, it's interesting when I was reading the transcript, the war is an important backdrop for many of the profiles that you spoke to. And even for you, Victoria, one of, I think, the more outstanding characters I read about was this Taiwanese who served the Imperial Japanese Army. And he's 104 years old. Tell us more about him.
Yeah, meeting the 104-year-old veteran, that was incredible. He looked like he was only in his 80s. He didn't even have to walk with a cane or a stick. He was so sharp, and he's still scrolling on his phone, telling jokes, and then sharing these war stories. Now, what really struck me was that how he described switching identities almost overnight. Now, one day he's fighting as a Japanese soldier, and the next he was a Chinese. And not because he chose to, but because history told him that he was. And that really hit me, how ordinary people just had to adapt to these huge shifts that they have no control over. Now, by the way, I asked Mr. Yang what's his secret to long life. He said he drinks miso soup every day. So that is something for everyone to think about if you want to live as long as he does.
Cool. Yeah, I think I'm going to start incorporating that too. But no problem for you, Michiyo. You probably take miso soup every day.
I'm a Japanese, but I don't take miso soup very much.
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should start. Yeah. Now I'm learning from him.
It's interesting, Vic, when you said that he was prescribed an identity. He was told that one day he was Japanese, the next day he was Chinese. At the heart of this wansei story is about belonging, isn't it? It's a sense of identity. Or being an outsider. What are your thoughts, Michiyo?
What do I think about identity, of the wansei identity?
I mean, they're caught in between two cultures and sometimes not belonging to either one.
The people that I spoke to were clearly Japanese, but they had nostalgic feelings towards Taiwan. So their identity as Japanese was one thing because they were raised in Japanese. They had education in Japanese. Their family's Japanese. They didn't marry into a Taiwanese family, so they were Japanese. But the memories of their childhood were all linked to Taiwan, the food they ate, the sweets they had, the air they breathed, and the friends they made in Taiwan. So I think identity memories were two different things.
Mm-hmm. Vic, what about you? What about this 104-year veteran? It's fascinating that he was prescribed identity. Did he adapt?
Basically, my biggest takeaway from this whole experience, this coverage, is that the feeling, what really stays with me was this feeling of being in between. Now, wansei didn't really fully belong in Japan or Taiwan, and the Taiwanese who grew up under Japan had to suddenly become Chinese. Now, that sense of being caught between worlds is still something that you hear in Taiwan today, like whether you're Chinese or Taiwanese. And it just made you realize how vulnerable identity really is and how much it's shaped by politics and history, not just where you're born.
Michiyo, my last question for you, as it was your mother's unique identity as a wansei that inspired this story. You had mentioned before your mother's memories were patchy, living in Taiwan and then even after she was repatriated to Japan. Why do you think that is? Do you think she couldn't remember or she didn't want to? Was there something blocking her?
Okay, I won't say she had photographic memory. She usually did not. But her character was that of an optimist. At least in front of me, her only child, she was always talking positively about things. What I can say is that her father lost everything after leaving Taiwan for good. He lost his eldest son in the war. It was hard for her family to start a life in Japan. Her father didn't have a job. And I did hear the family had to move around a lot in Japan. She changed schools many times. Finally, they settled in Tokyo, but she's hardly ever told me anything about her hardship. She may have told her close friends because they have told me, she didn't directly tell me, but her friends told me that she knew many things that many people have never experienced. So she never showed me any signs of her hardship.
All right. On that note, I want to say well done and congrats, Michiyo. And of course, Victoria, this story of yours has been in the making for how many years now?
Started in 2019.
Oh, great. Before COVID.
That's right.
And now it's finally ready. It's got all the elements of a dramatic screenplay. We've got World War II. We've got history. We've got survival, search for identity, belonging, love, and loss. Thank you for sharing such personal memories, Mitch, and of course, Victoria, for completing the picture from the Taiwan perspective of the wansei and the Japanese impact on the island. Find Michiyo's and Victoria's special report, Japan's Colonial Experiment in Taiwan, on CNA.Asia and YouTube. And don't forget to catch the TV episode of CNA Correspondent. It airs every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. Thanks for joining me on this special episode on the CNA Correspondent podcast. It's brought to you by Sai Win, Clara Ong, Tiffany Ang, Junani Johari, Pei Ning Ho, Ned Vetavaro, and Craig Dale. Bye for now.